5 boats been on it all day long. Now it's your turn. It's open. You come back and it's open. What are you gonna do? Don't go in there with a top water. You need to go in there with a finesse bait because they done seen everything. They done seen that Sammy splash the water. People don't throw Sammys no more. Y'all throw shower blows and all this other stuff. They done seen it hit the water. They done seen every walking bait. The fish, they done seen so many walking baits on Lake Hartwell. I think I've caught fish, you think they're jumping to shake your bait. They just trying to follow. They done seen so many that the fish just look like that. That's just how they act because they've seen so many topwaters over the last 20 years. Okay, so you got to think ahead. You got to think ahead. Okay, these fish have been pressured. What do I do next? One of the reasons, and I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but I think it just fits because of what I'm talking about here, is one of the reasons that I like finesse baits. One of the reasons I think it's good, especially for isolated fish, especially for fishing behind people, that I think gets overlooked. We already said finesse baits are smaller. We already said they're going to be a little bit lighter, going to be weightless. One of the reasons it's good is because you can cast them a lot more accurately. They're not as intrusive when they hit the water. I want you to think about this. Do many people here sight fish? And I'm gonna bring this back. I get to jumping around so much. You sight, not too many people raise their hand. I would encourage you to start sight fishing. Blessed enough to live around a lot of clear water here, so I've done a lot of sight fishing. You learn a lot about how your bait, sight fishing was the forward-facing sonar of the early 2000s. Now that y'all have these tools, you can see how fish react to your baits. When you sight fish in the spring, seeing how a fish reacts to your bait, how it reacts to your boat, we don't talk about that. Jay did talk about that. How a fish reacts to your boat and your presence just in his space. You learn so much about that, about how a fish reacts. You learn so much about how they react to just you being there by sight fishing. And one of the things you'll notice is just your cast. You can, even when you're sight fishing, sometimes you'll throw a bait out and your bait's in the air and that fish will move off bait. He'll like, oh boy, he'll come and set off and your bait will sit there still and you'll see him just kind of circle back to it. Do you guys know that that happens all year long? But you can't see it a lot of times. When you go to skip your jig on their dock and whatever fancy baits that you like to throw on their dock, a lot of times those fish, they hear that and they might get out of the way like, holy smokes, what is that? Sometimes they might bite it, but not a lot of times they might not. And so the reason finesse baits are really good, high pressure situations, fishing behind people, just sometimes the fish are just a little skittish, especially isolated fish. They're going to be skittish. Finesse baits, they hit the water and they just kind of just cascade down. They don't make a lot of noise. They don't make a lot of movement. They're just there. Especially for, and I feel like I keep saying especially for largemouth. Largemouth bass they're actually kind of lazy. A largemouth ain't that, they're for the most part. I'm not saying that some aren't out there crazy and doing their thing and jumping over here and doing. There's a group of them. But for the most part, a largemouth bass is lazy. He likes to sit behind stuff. A largemouth bass, he kind of wants to get behind somewhere and just wait. Just wait. He's like the police officer, a highway trooper. They almost ain't never out there just standing on the road like I'm a highway trooper. Slow down. Rarely. They get behind somewhere, don't they? And then they jump out. That's where a largemouth bass is. They like to get behind stuff. They're kind of lazy, don't really do a whole bunch. And so he's sitting there minding his business. And then all of a sudden, there just comes something floating through. It'd be crazy not to get it. Now, if you got a topwater coming over, a swim bait, what's something else for that? Crankbait, he can just sit there. And if he's hungry, yeah, he can go and get it. But he don't have to move. But a wacky rig just kind of just settling down into his face. It's like, you know what? I might as well go get that. And you have to think that way at times. Not all the time. There's going to be times, but most of the god doggone time, it's hard. It's very few times. I fish quite a bit. I fish somewhere between 8 to 12 tournaments a year. Most of them tournaments, it ain't going to be that good. Most of them tournaments, 12 to 13 pounds is going to get you a $10,000 check. Most of them. It's probably twice, as my dad says, probably twice a year that you need 15 plus when it's like you got to catch them. Most of the time, you got to kind of get in there and make it work. You got to make it happen. And so think about that when you're thinking about finesse. It's not going your way. You're out there, you're fishing, it's not going your way. What's going on? Chances are them fish are sitting right there where you are, comfortable, especially if it's largemouth. Spotted bass and smallmouth is a little weird. I'm not even gonna talk about smallmouth because that animal right there is, I don't know where its brain, I think its brain is in its tail. That's why he swim off so much. Largemouth, very lazy fish. It's very lazy fish. They really don't want to move, don't want to chase for the most part. So you got to think about that. A little small, non-assuming bait. Why do you think the Ned rig is so good? It's like them little peppermint candies that Jocelyn's got at the desk when you come in. You don't want a peppermint at 8 o'clock in the morning. You know you don't want one, but it's right there. It's like, I guess I'll eat one. And now your breath stink the rest of the day because you filled it up with sugar. so it's the same way. That's why Ned rig is so good. It's unassuming. It's not intrusive. I might as well bite that, a little 2-inch piece of plastic. That's why a wacky rig is so good. Wacky rig works from 1 foot to 50 foot because it's just floating natural. They got it. It's, well, I might as well get it. It's right there in my face. Okay. I already kind of talked about that. We need data. Being able to get bites is going to be the schoolmaster to getting you to where you need to be. I'll call these, I'm 41. I'm 41, so when I was in high school, they used to call drugs, they would call certain drugs, like cigarettes were gateway drugs. You start smoking cigarettes, you might start doing something else. And so I think of finesse baits, I call them, and some of y'all probably heard this, I've talked about this in my other seminars before. They're like gateway baits. And I'm gonna show you something here in a minute, tournament that I fished, I think it was Gunnersville. Finesse baits can be gateway baits. So maybe you're not a finesse fisherman. I know a lot of people don't like to throw spinning rods.